Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Tuesday, May 9th. It's a Project Prospect edition. Derek and Riper, Eno Chris Welsh here with you, digging into some promotions, some demotions, some recent arrivals, and all sorts of other things focused on the long term, mostly, and young players, of course. And we're going to begin today talking about Bryce Miller, because last week, just prior to his debut, we didn't talk about Bryce Miller. 2 starts in the book so far. Wildly different results between what he was doing in AA and what he's done early on here with Seattle. And at least a simple question, how good is Bryce Miller? Now, I'm going to throw it to you first because there are some interesting layers to the pitch mix with Bryce Miller that might still be in development.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to him after his Oakland start, and we'll have a piece on this with Corey Brock coming out later this week. That'll go more into depth into all of this and how he's developed it and what he's come through in terms of the minors and what they've done with his pitch mix. But what was pretty interesting is when you're looking at, say Savant or Fangraphs, it says that he's throwing a four-seamer, a slider, a sweeper, and a changeup. And that's sort of what he told me, but what he told me doesn't really line up with what I'm looking at. So what he told me was he throws a gyro slider. So that's the 87 to 89 mile an hour pitch that's called a slider on Fangraphs and Baseball Savant and Brooks. The slider there is a gyro slider, so it's hard, it has less movement than usual, and it's all about command and putting it in the right place, and it's more effective against the lefties than the sweeper. So,
can you explain the difference between, because they also designated it as a cutter in the first start, what differentiates a cutter so people can know from a gyro? Like, what makes it a gyro and us not just calling it a hard slider or a cutter?
Well, generally it doesn't have a good active spin. It doesn't. So for example, his slider has 25% active spin. And so it's basically not turning the spin into movement. And that's a way you can spot a gyro slider. Another way that you can spot it is that it has more drop than a cutter, and actually less horizontal movement. So if you look at his slider, on Savant, you'll see it has 2 inches less horizontal movement than the average slider. And if you're looking for a cutter, if that was mislabeled as a cutter, should have, I don't know, 6 inches more horizontal movement, or at least as much average movement as a slider, right? Because the cutter is supposed to be zip, it's supposed to be like a one plane, sideways movement. So the fact that it has less sideways movement than cutters and sliders suggests to me that's a gyro slider. And the closest you get to kind of 0-0 on Brooks, that's a gyro slider. It's a bullet. It's supposed to be bullet spin. It's supposed to be just basically as straight as possible. And the idea is that's super easy to command, useful against both sides, and hard. So it comes off, he's got the 96 mile an hour fastball, he's got the 86, 87 mile an hour slider, and it's a different velo, but when it comes out of his hand, looks like the fastball and moves differently from the fastball. So that's the gyro slider. Now, what they have on Savant as the sweeper, I don't believe is his sweeper, because he told me that he has basically like a power curve, like a curveball that is 81 miles an hour and has 2-plane movement. And if you look at Savant, the sweeper, they said, it has 8 inches more drop than the average sweeper. So that to me already says that's not a sweeper. Sweeper is supposed to be much more one plane. It's supposed to be, it has a little bit of depth, but it's more about its horizontal movement. Now look at his sweeper. It has less horizontal break than the average sweeper. So what he told me was his curveball is basically a depthy sweeper. So I guess that's why Savant is capturing it this way. But as you can see, it's a 2-plane pitch. Now, if you go over to Brooks Baseball and do a scatter chart, you can see that one of his curveballs, as they've got listed there, or sweepers as they have on Savant, is closer to the 0 line and has 5 inches less drop than his other sweepers. So if I had to guess, I would say he's thrown 1 sweeper and the rest are curveballs. Why does that matter? I think it's more pitches than people think. He's not just a four-seam gyro slider guy. He's obviously more than that. And the two changeups he has thrown have been beautiful in terms of movement, and a lot of horizontal movement for a guy that has a extreme over-the-top head tilt kind of release. To get good horizontal movement on the changeup is difficult, and I see a full arsenal.
I'm so excited that you got this too, because I've been talking about Bryce Miller since, spring training. I've been very high on him, and it hasn't matched up what he told me, because he told me the exact same thing he's telling you. He's like, I throw two sliders now, a gyro and a sweeper. And in that first start, when you go and look, and I saw that the sweeper usage was so up, I hadn't been able to wrap my head around what was going on.
He said his sweeper was like a couple weeks old.
Yeah, he said he wasn't comfortable with it when I spoke to him in spring training, that he was still like working on it. So you and I were talking before this and even trying to speculate, because I thought that sweeper might be the curveball, which does dispel exactly what you just said. The kind of like, hey, could he be the next Spencer Strider because he's a two-pitch pitcher? He is dominant fastball, but he's got these two other offerings. And what it also tells you is you haven't seen the fourth pitch yet, or fifth pitch. If you talk about, if you were to start throwing the changeup, the sweeper hasn't been there. One of the most fascinating things about this, though, and I'm excited to hear it because I haven't even heard it, is we've been trying to dissect what the hell happened in the minor leagues, because we didn't get any AAA numbers. You said you talked to him and there was some information about, and he said what his struggles were in AA, correct?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a developmental thing. We talk about this sometimes in the minor leagues, that, some people will just want to throw away minor league stats and say, oh, they're always working on stuff and it's inconsistent, matchups, and, you can't really use minor league stats. I am not in that camp. However, this story will tell you that there are some problems with minor league stats. And one is, he said the invective was throw strikes, throw sliders, throw strikes. And so he has a beautiful fastball, of course, because he's got that over the top, extreme over the top, a lot of ride. In fact, I think when I last looked, most ride amongst fastballs thrown by starters. So already number one on a leaderboard. And so he has that fastball, and they're trying to figure out the correct slider mix, which we are already being like, does he throw three? Does he throw two? Like, what is going on here? So, and they're trying to get him to learn the sweeper. And he said, developmentally, the first thing that he encountered in the minor leagues was everyone has to throw a gyro slider. That's the thing. And that's from research that, like Stuff Plus, that says that the 87-mile-an-hour slider, there's not a bad 87-mile-an-hour slider out there. And so everybody was trying to throw the gyro slider. And he said, the newest thing is I got to throw a sweeper because everyone's throwing a sweeper. So I'm trying to throw a sweeper, but, I can't always command it. And so he said that, A, it was all about throwing strikes and throwing sliders. B, he was throwing sweepers in 0-2 and 1-2 counts. And that, instead of turning into whiffs, it was turning into soft contact. And then C, he said that, really strangely, you expect to have a game where the wind's blowing out and every infield hit, every squibber is a hit. You expect to have that once in a while. He said, my first three games were all that. He said the wind was blowing out 40 miles an hour in two of his games, and every sweeper he threw turned into a little squibber that turned into a hit. And he said he's not, it's just one of those things that you kind of laugh it off. So there's developmental issues along with just weird park factor stuff and just noise.
And something to add to it with those as well is how awesome that rotation is that they've got in the minors right now at AA, that Arkansas rotation. Emerson Hancock, Prelander Baroa, and Taylor Dollard. Guess what? All these guys have over 5 ERAs right now. Prelander, 34 strikeouts in 22 innings, but he's got a 5.16 ERA. Emerson Hancock, 5.16 ERA, 31 strikeouts in 22 innings. Just maybe putting that out there, if there is a narrative of you just throw middle strikes and they are actually making big adjustments, might be part of the reason why you see guys like Dollard and Prelander and Emerson have a little bit more inflated stats. It seems across the board.
How are their walk rates compared to the past? Because maybe there's a developmental thing there to just be like, hey, let's reduce walk rates right now. Because if you look at Bryce Miller, it was the best walk rate of his minor league career.
Yeah, I think Prelanders is up. I was looking on MLB Pipeline so I can see it all together. You can see, well, actually, you know what? It looks like a couple of them are up right now because Prelander and Emerson Hancock has the worst of his career, which isn't helping. But
or the thing could be, hey, we all need to throw the sweeper, and so they're all trying to throw the sweeper, and maybe they can't command it. You know what I mean?
Check this out. Emerson Hancock last year at AA, he's actually been in AA for 3 straight years because of injuries and stuff. 98 innings last year, had an 8.42 K per 9. This year in AA, a 12.31 K per 9. So massive K numbers have gone up
over and over again, because that's an organizational thing that we heard somewhere else, that the Mariners and Yankees are basically just they're teaching everybody the sweeper. They're not even going with the kind of sinker sweeper cutter thing. They're just like teaching everybody the sweeper. I mean, if you look at it, I said to Bryce Miller, he's like, I thought from your angle, from your arm angle, the sweeper wasn't a thing. And he's like, maybe not, but I'm going to try to learn it, So maybe he settles in and it's just curveball, gyro slider, and fastball, but the changeup has a great shape. And I don't think the command is actually an issue. I'm all systems go on him. So, I dropped $38 on him or $37 on him in AL Labor because I really needed a starter, and the starters had been going for like $33, $34. I'm going to get some money back from Jeffrey Springs, and the time has passed is one of those things that came up real quickly near the end of a weekend, and we talked about it some on the cast, but I'm all in.
It's tricky to me because I think minor league numbers, for a variety of different reasons, are not helpful. I'm going to say they're nearly useless on the screen if you're watching us on YouTube. The AA affiliate of the Mariners is not a part of the league that's using the pre-tacked balls. That's part of the Southern League is using the pre-tacked balls. And I think it was Kyle Glazer. Yeah, Kyle Glazer at Baseball America had a good story about a week ago about the impact of the pre-tacked balls jumping walk rates and causing all sorts of problems. Also increasing strikeouts, I believe, too.
Yeah, Andrew Abbott had a 20% K per 9 that dropped to 12 when he went to AAA after that.
Yeah, and he points out that with the pre-tacked ball, Andrew Abbott was getting 3 extra inches of carry on his 4-seam fastball while he was at AA, and then that, of course, went away when he went to AAA, and the ball changed. And it's like we take a look at these results and we're like, okay, AA, tearing up AA. That should be a good thing.
I had so many Andrew Abbott questions. And when we got to AAA, I was looking at the numbers and was like, I don't see anything here.
It's so strange because of the way that there are different rules, different balls, all these different variables. And then, of course, we've talked about minor league park factors and different elevations, all that kind of stuff. But then also on top of that, I think it bridges the gap between some of the things we're seeing with the Mariners prospects, maybe some of the things that are going on with Taj Bradley right now. The strategies in the minors are very specific to player development and not necessarily to throwing what you're comfortable with, throwing what you're good at and winning. Right. Winning doesn't matter in the minor leagues. It matters that you can execute what you need to execute to help the big league club down the road. That's the goal. And I think it's led a lot of people to say, what's going on with Taj Bradley? We got a few mailbag questions about him. It's been a couple of pretty rough outings for him at AAA Durham, just like 3 Ks in 5 2/3 innings. One of those starts lasted 1 inning, 12 earned runs allowed. And on top of all of that, I thought part of the reason he was going down was to shift to a 5-day rotation schedule. That hasn't happened yet. Still going 6 days.
It's crazy. I've been really sitting on this one and trying to figure out what's going on with Taj Bradley. So I'm going to throw this out and Eno can speak to all of it. I've been thinking there has to be something different, kind of like what we're talking about here. There's an initiative with Bryce Miller, right? I felt like there had to be an initiative more than the 5 days that have led to some lack of results in Taj Bradley from where he was. And there's some big usage differences. So I'm going to just take his last start in the major leagues, which was up against the Astros. That was obviously a tough matchup. This was his usage, 45% cutter. Number 1 pitch was cutter. It had a 30% whiff rate. Bam. He was 40% 4-seam fastball, pretty low CSW strikeout percentage, and he was 13% curveball. Absolutely no changeups. His curveball was pretty weak. It had no whiffs. It had a CSW of 18. So we now then go to the minors, and this is where things get interesting. in his crap start where he got blown up and went 1 inning. He threw 41 pitches in there. He was fastball, four-seam fastball, 56% with a cutter usage down to 39%. Maybe that's not like too insane in the instance of, in the 40s on both those other pitches, but you can see the gap. Yeah, you can see the gap widening. Changeup and curveball, he threw 1 apiece in that start. So now we go to the next one. The next one, he threw 75 pitches, 56% four-seam fastball. Again, that was the big pitch. Cutter came down to under 30%. It was 28% usage. This time, curveball still barely used, only 4%, but the changeup came up to 12% usage. So what we see here are 3 things. Curveball going away, changeup used more, and four-seam being the dominant pitch. All these things have happened in his last 2 starts versus the major leagues, which leads me to think that was the initiative of what they wanted him to do. Eno can actually speak to this via Stuff Plus and what's seen. But I think if you're looking, hey, what's the problem here? His usage is completely changing from the success he saw in the majors, but the Rays may have found something that they wanted to tweak now, and that might be leading to some of these problems we're seeing in the minors where he's getting beat up. He's given up 12 earned runs in his last 2 starts,
Yeah, and if you look at the results or the Stuff Plus, you can see why they want to de-emphasize the curve. It has a 273 batting average against, a 546 slugging, a 273 ISO against that curveball, and by Stuff Plus, it's his worst pitch. So, in fact, everything that they're doing right now is you could say was optimizing for Stuff Plus. In terms of his fastball being the best pitch that he's got, the cutter being the second best pitch, and the changeup being pretty decent, and the curveball being below average. So they're de-emphasizing the curveball, they're re-emphasizing the fastball, and all of those things make sense. The sort of the asterisk that's forming for me is there's some pretty poor fastball command numbers in here. And I guess I was kind of surprised by that. And I think the reason that he is using the cutter so much is he can command it better than his fastball. So he came up and he's in the major leagues and he had to put the pitch in a certain place. So he used the cutter a ton, but the fastball is superior. So in essence, they're doing the oldest thing in the book. They're asking him to work on his fastball command. And that's why his walk rate is through the roof. And they're doing that at the same time as maybe trying to reestablish his spot in the rotation every 5 days. So none of this sounds very hopeful, maybe, but I'm still hopeful. I looked at his Stuff Plus per start, and in his last start, it was a 119. And even with the location plus question marks that I put around it, it had a 98 location plus. So I actually think he's going to dominate his next start. I don't know what that means for when he gets back up, but I remain hopeful. I see a great foundation, and this is more, get your fastball right, and you're going to be a fastball cutter change guy when you come back.
Well, and I think as long as the Rays just keep winning and keep preserving their lead in the AL East, that just keeps buying them more time to wait it out. If that gets closer in the next few weeks, then there's more pressure to bring a guy like Bradley up and use him as an upgrade over the weakest link in that rotation. It just makes it harder to justify holding him when we start to lose hope that it's going to be a quick turnaround. And it becomes even more complicated with Tyler Glasnow getting close to returning, right? Because instead of being 1 injury away, Taj Bradley could become 2 injuries away, depending on how things are going. It's encouraging to see that the model is still good, even though the results have been poor. I think while I wanted to hold him when he first got sent down, we all know that's a luxury. You can do it for a little while. Eventually, week 3, week 4 of holding someone who's not coming back up, more guys get hurt, more guys are underperforming. You have to make a move in your redraft leagues. So yeah, I don't know. I'm torn now. Like I'm starting to look at him as someone who might have to be dropped in redraft leagues, even though I was among the many people who threw a ton of FAAB in his direction. I'm starting to develop a really sour taste about FAAB this year. I feel like it's just gotten out of control. Like it's worse than past years. People are more aggressive. We talked about it a little bit on the Friday show. if the minor league results are so skewed, and this would apply to hitters too, by the way, if pitching's all screwed up for all the reasons we talked about a few minutes ago, hitting performances in the minor leagues might not be as meaningful as we want them to be either. Tearing up a bunch of minor league pitchers who are working on stuff might not be as good as we think.
You're bringing up something that's interesting, and I don't want to like poke at it or anything, but when like you're having this conversation, I definitely am not an elitist to be like, oh, you have to have your eyes on the players and stuff like that, even though I do. But it throws out an interesting question on a lot of the prospect modeling that's going on, and the stuff that kind of auto generates statistics, especially sounding like from you, DVR. What value do you have in that type of stuff? Because I actually think it's incredibly valuable to have these generated prospect lists that are just statistically based, so you can find names to look deeper into. I don't particularly like the rank generations off of them, but I think they're very useful in identifying players. But as you poke even harder at minor league stats and we learn about players testing out things, it's a lot less sticky, as we would say here. It's a lot less sticky to look at that type of stuff and build your entire thesis off of players that minor league stats might mean even less to you now, with altered balls at different levels and different agendas and narratives that are going on. Because I don't disagree. I think it is tougher to buy into stats more and more. And that's why you want to have a familiarity of really what the game is.
Yeah, I think that's I know you need all the ingredients. I've never doubted that. I know you need scouting. You need the ability to use numbers. You need the ability to do modeling. All of these things matter, but I think there are so many wrenches being thrown in at each spot. If you're using prospect lists and scouting evaluations, there could be bias in there based on where the player was drafted.
Think
or
about
different
what's
things.
happening at the major league level too.
Yeah. And by the way, when I say modeling, I'm not
balls,
talking about stuff plus
modeling. Like there's all sorts of strange things happening in baseball right now. It's the run environment has gone. 2019 was like the biggest home run year in the history of baseball. And then 3 years or 4 years later, we had like a dead ball that was like, oh, okay, well, now we're back 15 years in terms of how the ball's flying. And now the ball's flying again. Not quite like 2019, but more like 2021. Like it's hard.
And clarification is, I'm not talking about like stuff plus modeling or some of the back end stuff. I actually think that might be the key. When I say the auto-generated stuff, it's off of generating like hits and slugging percentage and kind of surface level stats that we're talking about here. The key to breaking through that is getting hard hit numbers and getting stuff plus numbers. That's the key to kind of break out. And that's, I think, what makes a lot of whoever is able to use that makes that modeling better. But there are a lot of like, we just look at the statistics and we don't care about levels or age versus levels, and that's how we build it. And that is less sticky maybe than it's ever been before, which is, it's crazy. Minor leagues are crazy right now. It took a lot, for us to talk about Bryce Miller before. I feel a little vindicated to be able to talk about Bryce Miller. Bryce Miller is not someone statistically surface level that popped out to anybody in that first month because he was having poor results. But it's a matter of seeing the guy, talking to the guy, talking to other players about it, and being able to identify those players regardless of stats, which sometimes give us that little advantage.
I'm going off the rundown here for a second.
That's fine. No, we can keep going off the rundown. I mean, part of this for me is that Bryce Miller, for all the young pitchers that we were drafting throughout draft season for redraft leagues, Bryce Miller was in that next level below. He was on prospect lists. He was on the radar for keeper leagues and dynasty leagues, of course.
It took an injury and another pitcher to get to him.
But they did say he almost had the opportunity to make the roster. Sorry, they had said in spring training like he was ready to be in that rotation if they had a spot.
To that. I don't know.
Yeah, I know it's nonsense.
But it was a lot of Andrew Painter and Kyle Harrison, Grayson Rodriguez going much earlier than those guys. Hunter Brown, Fott, like all those guys could still be good. I'm not saying we were total idiots. Everyone's wrong, and we all suck at this. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's amazing to me that with all the information we have, with all the tools at our disposal, the guys that come up and get 20, 25, 30% of people's FAAB budgets are guys we could have drafted and stashed, just like the guys that we stashed that didn't get the opportunity. And something about that is driving me crazy right now because it's an inefficient use of in-season resources, and it's a miss throwing those late darts in certain drafts.
Bryce Miller around for 4 weeks before he came up?
I guess would you? Yeah, do people keep FOT around? That's the other. It's like if you're in a league where FOT was held, a redraft league where FOT was held, then
Yeah,
the
but
answer is you
draft
could've.
champions, man. We should have all had Bryce Miller. Jesus.
Right, and even Mason Miller, even though he's hurt right now, but based on the stuff and the opportunity, and nobody had Mason Miller. Like there was a big difference. Like Bryce Miller, sort of on that radar, was on that radar for some people. Mason Miller wasn't on that radar at all as far as being actually drafted. Welsh, you had him in one of your pieces for The Athletic as like a super deep sleeper.
Yeah, I was going to say, not our dear friend Nando was kind enough to tweet that out of the clouds, by the way. But yeah, in my Dynasty article I put together preseason, I was also talking. This was actually like in a semi-redrafty type of conversation as well. I did have Mason Miller in my AL prospects for people to watch because I did a hitter, a pitcher, and then a deep Dynasty guy. So my 2023 AL sleeper was Mason Miller. And one of the guys too, Justin Durden, was my hitter. And he just won Player of the Week. So he didn't break camp, so that one didn't really work out. But he's starting to pick it back up, and hopefully he's going to make the majors soon.
This is the one I was going to go off the rundown here real quick. But have you ever heard of Ben Brown?
Ben Brown with the Cubs, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking at his minor league stats, and especially ever since he came over to the Cubs, but also last year with the Phillies in High A. Just wicked strikeout rates, like really nice strikeout rates, basically like a 34% strikeout rate in 130 innings since he hit A ball with the Phillies. And it's supported by a really good swinging strike rate. And if you go over to the Google Doc, subscribers will find that he is the newest entry into the top 10 in Stuff Plus in AAA. So you've got, you've got excellent, like sort of stats, like excellent result numbers. Model likes him. You look over to Location Plus, but it's only one start. So you're just, okay, 78 Location Plus. But then you start to look at, oh, well, he did have some bad walk rates and, a 45 command grade. And then you go into the pitch level stuff for Ben Brown, and it's really strange. Really good four seam and good sinker, but mostly really good four seam, really good slider, and then cutter and sinker. So is that enough?
It might be enough.
I think it could be.
Command?
It's also interesting you didn't mention the curveball because the Fangraph scouting grades have a 60 grade curveball for Ben Brown. The knock on him has always been the command.
Hates it.
It's interesting especially with a breaking pitch, when
unless the
scouting eye and the model are divergent on a pitch.
Yeah, well, I mean, unless the cutter is the slider and the slider is the curve.
And we're seeing a lot of that. I'm being very dicey about this stuff now, especially after what we saw with Baseball Savant, where it's like, if anyone saw Guardians of the Galaxy, it's like that moment where it was like, no, you don't hit blue to talk. You have red is yellow and green is blue.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that moment of Baseball Savant right now with pitching. It's very difficult.
Yeah, and then the minor league stuff, they don't clean up as much. So
another complication. And on top of all this, Joe Sheehan had this tweet on Monday, and he's exactly right. He wrote, "We've gotten so much worse at communicating the rhythms of the long season. Baseball was never meant to be covered like football. It would be nice if we stopped doing that." And I think that was directed more at
demands of media. I mean,
like the journalism aspect of coverage of baseball. But Twitter brings out the worst in all of this, where people want to just be first and right. And they want to be the one that had the GIFs and the videos and scouting reports on players before they were good. And I'm poking fun at our whole hobby in some sense with Ben Brown, the next $200+ FAAB pick. But it could happen.
Not what I'm saying, but yeah, the hype machine could get rolling.
That's all it's going to take for Ben Brown to do that is like 2 or 3 more good starts at AAA, and then a promotion, and then before FAAB runs, he comes up and strikes out like 8 guys.
Oh, all it's going to take him, DVR, is coming up on a Tuesday and striking out 8. It doesn't even matter what his minor league numbers are.
And then we have the whole week to salivate.
They'll be like, I missed out on Bryce Miller, so now here's where my $200 go. I 100% agree with what you're saying. Not recognizing that it is okay to like take a step back and know that there is another wave that will be coming into the near future. And that wave is, you know, the elite guys, Gavin Williams. The next guy, if we're being honest here, I think Ben Brown is a great name.
The top 10 too.
But Matthew Liberatore is probably that next guy, and he's going to mess with everybody because, well, and see, it's interesting you say that because he has been putting up such good minor league numbers. People want him up. When he comes up, if he is dominant in one start, I'm going to tell you right now, that's the next $200 FAAB guy. Whether we like it or not, he will be if he is good in his first start whenever he gets called up. I almost guarantee it.
Yeah, I'm out.
Why are you out, by the way?
I don't think it's a good fastball shape. And
yeah,
he's trying what he can to like build around it, but it's fundamentally not a good fastball shape.
Here's where I'm at now. This is what I'm looking for. This is my new scouting method. I want players who have bad stats, like bad results in the minors, bad scouting reports, and bad numbers in the models, because those are the only players you could have for next to nothing. I want discounts. I want bargains. I want players that people think are garbage.
Has there anybody been like that
across the board?
Doing well?
Is there anybody that everyone thinks is garbage? It's I don't know. Even if I said Ian Hamilton as a reliever, you'd say Ian Hamilton has a good slider. There's something about Ian Hamilton that probably would have flagged him as good.
I think you just described Matt Liberatore, though, by the way. I think he did just describe Matt Liberatore with bad stats, bad scouting reports, and bad model numbers. So I'm just pointing it out. That's your guy. That's your guy, TBR.
But it comes down
Ian
to
Hamilton's a good answer, too, actually.
But it's the stupid thing about this is it kind of works on some level. It's too extreme. You can't only play with players like this. But this is a game about opportunity. It's guys that play. You win by getting guys who play a lot, because to play a lot, you have to play well for the most part.
Right.
So
like Gavin Williams has 113 stuff plus, 5th best in AAA, but there's 2 young guys in front of him, and we tried our best to get them into the rotation. What happens? You have to have more injury to get Gavin Williams up, I think.
That's true.
Yeah. This has been a fun episode so far. Now I'm just staring at the injured pitchers in the rundown, and I'm just angry. I mean, Mason Miller, elbow tightness, went back to the Bay Area. We'll see what further tests reveal there. That one, the people who
knew that was coming, though.
You knew the risk. It was clear risk. Like I took the risk. I'm not saying you're wrong if you did. Sometimes guys are hurt for a little while and then they're not. Like, that happens. You can't pretend like guys miss time and then only continue to miss time after that. That's not always the outcome.
Although past injury predicts future injury.
It does. It 100% does.
But everybody seems injured at some point.
Well, and it just this year just feels like we're going to see just a gross number of injuries. Ricky Tiedemann hit the 7-day IL with some biceps discomfort. That's a potential big one for the Jays.
Is he on the IL officially yet?
The 7-day IL. They didn't say anything about like a long-term absence for him yet, but
slightly better news than when he seemed like pointing at his arm and was walked off the mound immediately. I was like, oh God, that's TJ.
Yeah, so we'll see if anything else comes from that. And then since we last spoke, Daniel Espino had shoulder surgery, and that one's a little more like the Mason Miller, where it's like it's one thing after another. If you've been rostering him, if you traded for him,
really spin it.
He's going to be really good if he's ever healthy, but he's out 12 to 14 months because he had the anterior capsule repair.
Is not good, dude. Anterior capsule. Isn't anterior capsule what happened to that guy who came to San Diego in the what trade was it? He came Anderson Espinoza.
Oh no, he had like 2 Tommy Johns with the Padres. It was like almost back-to-back Tommy Johns. It's funny. I like saw him for like 2.5 years in the backfields of the Padres. He was always walking around with just his arm in a sling because he was just never pitching. Do you think the Mason Miller one is going to be season impactful, that it's like we just cut him, like it's going to be the type of injury where you're going to be out for the rest of the year based on his amount of innings and stuff like that? Because it's different than what's going on with the year.
But I think that no matter what they say, there's going to be a rest period.
Well, and there's going to be ultra careful with him if he feels anything.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So that could be what's happening right now. This could be short IL stint back in a couple of weeks. I think if we get a timetable and it's more than 2 weeks, I think you probably have to think about dropping him, which is absolutely terrible. But there is a problem people have with the sunk cost fallacy and being unwilling to drop players that they spent a lot of money on.
Just that. I hear you, but I'm in the middle of nursing Taj Bradley along in my main event. And let me just defend.
I got both of them.
I'm defending myself a little bit. You fell in love with them for a reason.
Yeah.
And so that reason still exists. It's not, I mean, I can appraise those two things and be like, okay, it's a sunk cost, I should move on. but also there's a reason I love this guy. So if he was on the wire, I would want to pick him up, you know? So I shouldn't drop him just yet. So I don't know. We've got him sitting right next to Tyler Glasnow, and I feel like what I really want to do is put Tyler Glasnow in the or that might be a different league. In one league I have Taj Bradley and right next to Tyler Glasnow. I just want to put Tyler Glasnow in the starting lineup, and Taj Bradley becomes my new Tyler Glasnow. That
if you have an IL, you don't have to worry about it. If you have an IL, if you're not playing, if this isn't NFBC, you're okay. You don't have to make the big tough decisions, and hopefully people won't have to make that about Mason.
It's not on the IL, and so that is hard in redrafts no matter what. That's a burnt bench spot.
Yeah, it's a shame because Mason Miller has looked really good so far. 21 and a third innings, 3.38 ERA, 0.98 WHIP, just over a strikeout per inning so far. Just a matter of keeping him on the field. Eury Perez, by the way, cruising at Double-A. He's one of the pitching prospects that I was pretty excited about throughout draft season. Really interesting arsenal. 42-9 strikeout to walk ratio in 31 innings so far, and he's gone at least 5 in each of his last 5 starts. So it really seems like the way they're using him at least gives him a chance at seeing Miami by season's end, because he's been pitching on regular rest every 5th day for his last couple of turns.
Imagine that.
They did it. They put him on the schedule to see what happens. Does he feel okay? Does everything still move the way it's supposed to?
He throws that power change like Edward Cabrera too, right?
Yeah. It's like a high 90s. And he spent the entire offseason with Sandy Alcantara, probably learning and defining what that change looks like. Eury Perez is that other guy. When you talk about the big names, it's like Eury and Gavin Williams
when he comes up.
Yeah. But I think, like we talked about with Evan Carter last week, Eury's got to get to AAA. I think they need to see the AAA number. So it's a little bit, but that's what that next wave, that second half of the season, the next wave guys, Eury will get some time this year, but it'll probably be after many others.
Till the trade deadline-ish to like trading away a starter,
Yeah.
Like you sometimes you look at the standings and you're like, what are the Marlins gonna do? 17 and 19 with a new general manager who wants to win. Are they gonna pack it in? Are they gonna keep going? How does that figure into their appraisal of Braxton Garrett? Because if they're like, it doesn't look like it's our year, then you just keep putting Braxton Garrett out there to see if he's going to be part of the next good team. And then they trade away, somebody, Luzardo or Rogers or whatever. Is Rogers hurt?
Cabrera? I think Cabrera. I think he's been super inconsistent to the point that there's a time where they can make a tough decision.
You would trade away Edward Cabrera?
I think they can. Yeah, I think
just because that would be the one that gets you the most back.
You get most back, and then you'd have Eury, you'd have Luzardo, you would build off of Alcantara, Eury, and Luzardo, and then you play with those other 2 spots, and they've got guys. I got Trevor Rogers, Max Meyer's going to come back at some point.
Rogers doesn't get you anything in a trade right now, probably. Although he's been out there, I know this because I've talked to other teams that are poking around on, is Trevor Rogers good, and have asked me about what I think.
That's not a good sign.
Yeah, so Rogers is on the block, but I don't know that anybody's biting, despite some okay model numbers.
Well, we had a relevant question from one of our listeners. This is from Jesse. Jesse has to cut one of Roansy Contreras, Edward Cabrera, or Josiah Gray. I think Eno for sure is going to cut Josiah Gray. Eno will never like Josiah Gray. I have that right?
Not? I mean,
maybe Josiah Gray is the guy you're talking about.
I mean, his fastball's down a little bit, but he's been so much more efficient. Is it immediately Josiah Gray over Edward Cabrera?
Me, yes.
Okay. I'm not getting rid of Roansy.
Okay. I just don't trust. I think the home runs are going to come back. Although the cutter has helped him suppress some of that hard contact, but. Josiah Gray is what we were talking about. My model doesn't like him. Sierra doesn't like him. I don't think anybody likes him.
What I don't like
he'll have a Cal Quantrill year where he just for some reason have a 3 ERA for the season.
I'm not the biggest fan of a 7 walk per 9, which Edward Cabrera has so far in the year, just throwing out.
Yeah, I guess
so. I'm going to dump Cabrera. The Ks are great, but he is walking at levels that starters can't. There's nothing supportive in his ERA. His expected ERA is 4.5 right now. His home run to fly ball, it's almost 1.5 homers per 9.
I would just be like, I can at least start him at home, right? His home run rate's got to be lower at home.
Yeah, but his
Who's he here?
career walk rate in the big leagues is 14%. And
Yeah,
we're at
that's a
130
problem.
big league innings now. How many guys have thrown that many innings with a walk rate like that and gone on to figure it out?
That seems like
Maybe in the
something I can
bullpen.
look up really quickly.
Yeah,
I think
I
he'd be a
hope
great closer.
I hope
So
you
how
can
old is he?
find it. He's
Edward, I think
still
he's
25.
25.
Just turned 25 in April.
Okay, I'm doing filtering age to 25. How far back should I go?
2000 if you can
2000?
go back that far. Yeah,
2000.
the baseball that I can remember is about 2000.
All right, so from 2000 to 2023, 14 to 25 years old. You want me to do starters only?
Let's do starters only. Let's say
Starters
minimum,
only.
even just say minimum of
I have a
50
minimum
innings.
of 100.
Okay, do 100. Do 100. It'll make the list
100
smaller.
innings, 14 to 25, and I'm going to sort by walk rate in the wrong way.
14% is that's really high.
Dude, it's not good.
No, it can't be. Did you find Dylan Betances in there?
Justin Dunn, Jesse Foppert. This is in order of bad walk rate. Justin Dunn, Jesse Foppert, Kyle Draback, Adam Lowen, Edward Cabrera, Robert Stevenson, Daniel Cabrera, Matt Clement, Rick Ankiel, who is just a unicorn and came back as a hitter anyway. Joaquin Benoit, Colby Lewis at 13%. Aaron Mayette, John Snyder, Damian Moss, Kason Gabbard, Kerry Wood, 12.3%.
Oh, 12.3%. Okay.
So Kerry Wood's the case. A lot of relievers
Cabrera
in there,
can
by the
push
way.
it down 2 percentage points over the rest of the year. He has a chance. I mean, it's not totally unlike Kerry Wood, right? Like just nasty stuff, great strikeout rate, poor walk rate. So it's that Kerry Wood is your guy, except
that's your hope. It's Kerry Wood.
One of 16.
Daniel Cabrera.
And I shouldn't keep going, right? Jamie Wright, Brandon Finnegan, Oliver Perez, Seth McClung,
a lot of relievers.
Sean Newcomb, Alan Webster. You hurt my heart. Robinson Tejeda, Brandon Morrow, Carlos Hernandez. Oh, these are all the guys I fall for.
Guys that got pushed to the back of the got pushed to the back of the bullpen there too. That is his future, man.
And I think you said Daniel Cabrera kind of early in that. I remember Daniel Cabrera having electric stuff and no idea where it was going. He was one of those first pitchers like that where I was watching him what if he could just locate even a little? How good could he be?
Even when I get to so Mackenzie Gore is 28th on this, Edison Volquez is 30th.
Volquez is another good one.
So once I get past the top 15, you got Kerry Wood, Mackenzie Gore, Edison Volquez. So you've got 3 guys who look like starters. Those guys average about 11.7%. So he has to improve greatly over the rest of this season to basically be considered a starter going forward, I think.
Yeah, so okay.
That's worse than I thought.
If I had any doubts about it, I feel okay cutting Edward Cabrera. And if you think someone in your league will trade you something for Edward Cabrera, by all means, pair him with someone else.
Might be the time to shop him in Dynasty while he's still being out there as a starter. Yeah.
While there's something. Yeah.
While he's a starter in a good pitcher's park where there's still plenty there to dream on. I think that would make a lot of sense.
We found 3 starters, and we're not even sure that 2 of them are good. I mean, Mackenzie Gore is still pretty young, and Edison Volquez was not that good.
Yeah. So, well, and the frustrating thing about some players with that profile is you think they're going to break through. So you keep taking on all the water, all the bad ratios. You just keep letting it in the boat, and it just
I had to cut
takes down.
I had Shintaro Fujinami had good stuff numbers, and I'm like, well, Location Plus doesn't stabilize quickly, but I had one start where I watched him, and I was just like, no. I can't do this.
Well, question for both of you. Can Chase Silseth be a DVR guy? Can he have bad enough numbers in the model? Can he be low enough on prospect lists? Can I just have this guy and just live with the consequences of a potential bad across the board?
Plus in AAA.
Nice.
The projections like him a little bit, but not a lot. I mean, like a 4.3 projection, league average projection, 509 Sierra, 460 Sierra for his career in the major leagues.
He had way too good of numbers for you in AAA, though, so that's what's going to dice it up. He was way too good in AAA this year for you.
He was good at AA last year, so that's
0.9 ERA, but a 4.33 xFIP, so we knew it was going to not be as good.
Well, we'll see. I think I'm willing to give you him. What were the other names we had?
I think Liberatore is
literally
Liberatore is the guy. Yeah,
these are our nobody likes him trio.
Perfect. I like Liberatore and I like Silseth, so I'll get them both. Leave them alone on your FAAB list this weekend, everybody. Keep them in like the 3 to 5% range, and I can go on with my life and continue being miserable.
I thought I went too hard on Jason Adam with $11, and he's looking like one of my better pickups.
Same.
That's brilliant. 11. You already got 4 saves out of him.
I know, it's probably worth $11.
That's worth 100. It's worth 10 times what you paid. That's what you're supposed to do in FAAB.
Yeah,
but it makes up for the dumb stuff.
Oh, you know, another one is Bryce Elder.
Okay, yeah, Bryce Elder.
His numbers, his projected numbers are too good, I guess.
Well, but when he first showed up, he wasn't hyped because it seemed like a temporary opportunity. He wasn't.
You could have Bryce Elder on this list. I think he had.
You almost have a whole rotation.
I'm getting there.
You need one more guy to fill out your garbage pitcher rotation.
Well, I know the model didn't like either one of Dylan Dodd or Jared Schuster, right?
Just about to say Dylan Dodd for you. I was just about to give him to you.
Yeah.
That's where
I almost think that you should rather get Dodd or Schuster because projections are okay for Elder.
Yeah. Dodd, I think, would be the play here because Schuster was like the #1 prospect in their system for some bits. So I think Dylan Dodd fits your model, fits the DVR garbage model.
The anti-model.
Yeah. The anti-model.
The anti-model. Just give me all the players nobody wants, and let me see if I can just do okay with this group.
We should just inverse it. We'll call it like the Lodem. We'll just inverse the words of model, and that'll be the DVR
Lodem. Yeah. As in load them up.
Yeah. That's
fantastic. A couple of other news items that might be of interest. Casey Schmitt called up by the Giants. Not an elite guy. Could play a lot, though, because they mix and match around the infield. He can play all over the place. Corresponding move was Darren Ruff being DFA'd. What do you think about Casey Schmitt?
He's an elite defender. When Marco Luciano got hurt, they put Casey Schmitt short, and he did fine. So, you know, I see that plus the fact that he really cut his K rate this year in the minors, and see like he might end up being the kind of glue that this team needs because they're doing okay getting a lot of good defense out of people that don't play good defense normally. But at some point they just need some youth. And I wonder, did he play anywhere in the outfield? Because their outfield needs help.
I think he's been strictly an infield guy.
He has been. So,
yeah, he's kind of.
But I wonder if he's going to start taking some games at second because Brandon Crawford is oft injured and de-emphasized and a free agent to be. And so I wonder, is maybe Schmitt going to play short or Tyra Strada plays short and Schmitt plays second? I mean, there are the best defensive arrangement for this team includes Casey Schmitt.
So that's good for his playing time. I think the line for picking him up is still probably going to be mostly NL only leagues because look at the numbers as he's moved through the system. Above high A, Casey Schmitt has hit 5 home runs in 65 games. So I think you're going to get average. It's probably like a David Fletcher sort of profile as far as the roto comps go. He might not steal a ton of bases, could give you a non-zero in that category. So it's basically average in some counting stats if the glove gets in the lineup.
Fly ball rates are all over the place. Like he looks like he's trying to hit for power and then maybe stop trying to hit for power.
I've been trying to think of like who he is. Like, you know who reminds me of? Like, remember James Loney? James Loney would hit for contact, but just didn't have the big power, especially early on. Like, that's a kind of a similar approach. And I think the Giants in the lower levels will work a lot on like guys like high on base percentages and stuff like that. And I'm not sure he's made the big transition to being a power hitter. He did hit 21, I think, in 2022, but 17 of those came at high A, like you mentioned. So it was a big, large amount at low A ball. So I don't know if he's even made that transition. And I'm not sure he does make that transition because it's a plus defender who makes contact. And I don't think they're going to worry about like traditional first base stats, 25 plus homers. Yeah, he might. Yeah, it might be just a utility guy, like you said, because he's versatile around. I think it's NL or like really deep leagues. If you're struggling, he might get some more roster versatility.
Up against Brett Wisely for playing time. Wisely has been playing some outfield though. And that's important because they don't really have a true center fielder. But Wisely's projections are also kind of boring offensively, so there may be a little bit of a competition there to see who stays up, who gets sent down. Wisely
Von Brown would be a guy.
Plus walk rate. So
watch for Von Brown at some point. He's got to move up the system a little bit. He was hurt, but he's like, I don't know how much longer he can keep it down. He's like 24 at like high A or whatever.
Mike Yastrzemski in center. Von Brown can play center, right?
Yeah, I think he can play all across. So he might move up the system, and he might be a guy later in the year people can look at.
I mean, their biggest needs are defensively up the middle. So, I mean, maybe they're checking out Casey Schmitt to be their shortstop of the future. That'd be a little bit pushing his defense, I think, further than it might be able to go. But like, if you see the Giants auditioning somebody at short or in center, I would take well notice. Like Sable might end up, sticking with his team and getting more playing time than people think because he can catch. And if they decide that his combination of catching and offense is superior to Bart's, like that might flip. So they are really looking for something up the middle.
What do you think about Dominic Fletcher possibly wrestling playing time away from Alek Thomas, Welsh? Is this a reality? Because I was looking at Thomas as a potential longer-term buy low whose X stats were actually a lot better than his actual stats because of his defense. I thought he'd continue to play. It looks like a possible problem brewing playing time wise for Thomas.
Yeah, unfortunately, because like you said, you go and look at Baseball Savant and it's just red. You can just see all this underlying stuff that's just waiting to brew and pop up. But Fletcher's a guy I've been talking about for a while. And here's why I think he hurts, because that offense has picked up in other spots. Perdomo has picked up and been a real offensive force. And what I think that ends up doing is it leaves them this spot where they can say, we can value a guy that isn't going to hurt us enough on the field. And what I mean by that is like, he doesn't strike out or at the plate. He is not a big strikeout guy. He's 18% in the majors so far, 14%. Really. He walks, he plays great defense. He can run and he makes contact. He's a points league player. So in that respect, that totality of it could be better than Alek Thomas because he's just not hurting you as far as striking out. And he's just a good physical outfielder, but I just don't think it's going to come at the expense of Alek Thomas pulling a Jake McCarthy and being sent down. I think Alek is here to stay. They want to see him work through it, but I can see Fletcher hanging around for quite some time. So I still lean Alek Thomas full season, but I think Dom Fletcher is just a good, he's not a good fantasy player, but he's a good baseball player that fits the team need and kind of the construction of what they've got.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as much as we like X stats and all the underlying numbers, teams need results. If they're getting results from someone else, they're not going to be as patient as we would want them to be. And every game matters right now for the D-backs. Is it happening for Geraldo Perdomo?
I'm just saying, Fletcher has crazy BABIPs in the minors, like near 400 BABIPs in the minors, and you're just like, is that just bad defenses? Is that just putting the ball play over and over again?
It could be part of that.
Perdomo is one of your guys. I just can't believe it. I don't believe it. There was nothing to say this was coming. You tried to convince me, and I didn't believe you. And it's here, and I still don't believe it.
What's always stood out to me with Perdomo, I interviewed Christian Robinson years and years ago when he actually played baseball. And now he's back and he's playing baseball again. It feels like the last time I talked to him was when he was actually playing. And I had asked him at the time, I was like, who's a player that everyone needs to be on the lookout for? And he instantly was like, Geraldo Perdomo. Perdomo is the guy. And I had just at that moment seen, or like a couple days prior, I saw him hit his first professional homer, and like the way he could turn on the ball was there, but he turned into such a kind of ground ball slappy hitter in the AFL. He was always young at his age, and he just retransformed his approach. And I think it's real because he's not striking out. He's walking more. He's much better concerted decisions if you actually watch him. And again, I think he's a huge piece of what's giving this team flexibility and why they can make McCarthy go away, why Nick Ahmed is becoming less valuable. It's a Gold Glove shortstop that they don't need to play every single day. And I don't think he's like a 2020 guy, but I think Perdomo can be like a 15-10 or 10-15, one of those other ways of a player on this team. And I'm going to just throw out one other guy to pay attention to is Dominic Canzone. That's a player, if there's any injuries, we should pay attention to with the Diamondbacks because he's a real power bat killing it in AAA that could come up if Fletcher doesn't work out and they let go of Thomas. But you were going to speak on Perdomo,
Just no barrels.
Yeah,
Zero
he
barrels.
Hit the ball hard. That's weird.
He does not hit the ball hard. I don't even know how he's hit 7 home runs so far because he's a 2% barrel rate. because every barrel he hits is a home run. I'm not going to do it.
But see, this is where he's living in the Lodum range right now, because statistically it doesn't look good.
The Lodum.
Yeah.
He's right there. He's a switch hitting shortstop. He's 6'2", 203 pounds. He should hit the ball hard. So when you watch him,
projected for a 79 WRC plus by the Bat X.
It might have one of the most alarming batting average to expected batting average differences in baseball that I have seen. If you look, he's got according to Fangraphs, a 380 batting average with a 239 expected.
And that 239 is exactly where he's projected. So I'm hanging out with the models. You can hang out with the Lodum.
Yeah, it's been hanging out with the Lodums my entire life.
Put that on a shirt.
On that note, I think we'll go. We're going to get some mailbag questions on the show next week. So if you have some long-term league questions and even stuff about like current rookies and young players, we'll certainly try to get as many of those as we can, because we're getting far enough into the season where if you're worried about MJ Melendez or Miguel Vargas or Tristan Cassis or anyone like that, it's an appropriate time to dig in and see if there's an actual underlying flaw, because we're starting to get enough information where we can make a little bit more of a judgment call. Yeah.
I've also, I can let you guys know, if you guys want to be on the lookout on The Athletic in the next 24, 48 hours, I will have a prospect article of some high-rising fantasy prospects that have changed value that you guys need to be paying attention to, not just for redraft, but just for overall. So be on the lookout for that. Like I said, next day or two over on The Athletic.
There you go. And to see that, you're going to be a subscriber. You can get a subscription for $1 a month for the first year at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. You can find us on Twitter. Eno's at Enosaurus. Welsh is at the Welsh, and I am at Derek Van Riper. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.